Hey guys, sJourney here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review A Dog's Journey. I believe the sequel to the movie called A Dog's Purpose. I believe that's what the first one was called. I remember reviewing that when that came, generally when that came out. I actually enjoyed it, even though that movie did have that, I remember reading the articles about the potential dog endangerment with the whole water scene in particular. Nothing happened to my knowledge with this movie, so that's all avoided. Anyways, we continue our journey with a dog named Bailey, who, from what we can gauged from the first movie, whenever he passes away, he is able to resurrect as another type of dog, and this time he's been tasked by the owner, Ethan, to look after the granddaughter of the family at that farm, CJ, and she also is taken away by her mother, Grace. I think her name is like Gracia or something like that. Um, he starts off as a relatively small dog. Sort of remains for her for a bit in the beginning, but forget exactly what happens to him. But eventually, after the separation, the mom takes the dog away, or the dog, Ethan's dog, at that point, passes away. And this is like him saying, like, "Oh, protect her," so like he would have to come back. So it cuts to her hunting with, or looking for a new dog. With a new character named Trent, who also ends up getting a dog as well first, and then they end up like tricking the owner into like speeding up the process of getting the dog. So they do that. She sort of tries to hide the dog from her mom, I should say. Um, and the dog is like doing all, it's more of a rambunctious uh, dog at that point. So doing all that sort of stuff, tearing up all this sort of material from her. I forget how this dog passes, is like after a few days of like uh, being with each other. So, we see that this is like the last segment of them as like, or CJ as like a young kid. We see that as she is growing up, she learns to play the guitar because that is like her focus in this movie. The transition is close up on the hands on the guitars, and then you see the shift of the hands, and then she's an older teenager / adult who's ready for college. I should say just adult, ready for college. Um, and thus, she's very nervous about her performance, and she's always concerned about like, well, what am I doing? Or I'm not I'm not up to performing quite yet. I'm still in the early phases of it. So uh, again, I think it's after the flashback is when she loses the dog, and then like so it shows like him on this little pathway. I don't remember them doing this in the first movie, but it shows like him transitioning into like the next dog, which is like, it shows like a few little clips of dogs, and then I believe the next one was the big dog. This big dog that helps, or is just like at the uh, one of those little shops. I don't know what Joe. They called it like Joe's shop or whatever. Or maybe that was one of the ones later on, or the second one. I forget the order now. Jam again. If you want to support me on Patreon to get a second laptop so I can have my notes and not have that lagging problem, that is always greatly appreciated. Um, so, the sequence, I have a little out of my order in my head, but she eventually starts to hang out with this other guy, not Trent. I think his name's like Sean or something, and he's like a jerk character, pretty obviously at the get go, but she isn't seeing that quite yet. Um, so she'd rather hang out with this guy, and then he has his own dog, and then they're hanging out for a bit, and then he's like, "Oh, you want to go for a party?" And she's like, "Yeah, sure, I guess." So they go for a party, and then the police arrive, and then her and her dog get like separated temporarily, and then like Trent goes to like pick her up, um, and they start. He's like starting to talk about like her mom and like what she's gonna do and stuff like that. All the while, the dog now reunited with her at that point. Um, so uh, after that, we learn that she has to go through community service. I believe this is when Bailey was reborn as a female dog named, as she would come to learn, or name Molly. I believe this is the second or third dog. Um, and while she conveniently, this is pretty convenient for her, but in the story, um, her community service is to help out or train other dogs, and help clean up at a location where dogs are trained to smell out cancer, which I find rather interesting. I already knew that dogs could sniff out drugs specifically. I was not aware that they could potentially smell out cancer. I was not aware of this. If that is a thing, that's really cool. Um, Again, I'm not 100% sure about that. Um, and I don't think I would be as surprised as, again, I'm already aware that dogs already sniff out drugs and they do like all sorts of really cool stuff. And they're trained to do other really cool jobs as well. So this one again, I'm not 100% sure about, but it'd be pretty cool to get some confirmation for anyone who's like a dog expert. Um, so she sees that her dog Molly at this point. I guess I'll just go by the name of the current dog as to make it more clear which one I'm referring to. Um, so Molly does the trick as well. Like the dog would usually lay down in front of the person that is like she's confirming which person potentially or does have cancer at that point. Um, so we see that, and then the whole training stuff. So after like a few days of like training and stuff like that, we see another visit by Sean, who's like, sorry about the party, and then he like, um, she's like, no, I don't want to deal with you anymore, and then he gets pretty aggressive at this point, and then she like freaks out and runs, and then tries to tell her mom. Her mom's already drunk, not really paying 100% attention, as she's sort of freaking out. So I forget exactly what happens next, but at some point, she ends up in a car. She's like driving off to go somewhere, and then she ends up being chased by Trent, who's still like mad at her. And then he like bumps her car. It flips over. Um, she ends up being fine, but this is where Molly's point in the story stops, as her dog at that point in time passes away. So of course that would lead to another transition of another dog. I believe this is at this point the fourth dog, which is a much smaller dog named Max. So Bailey's now reset as Max, a much significantly smaller dog. Max is like at this little dog adoption like area. Of course, some more time has now passed. Max is like biting away other individuals that are trying to pick her up until CJ once again bumps into now Max. She sort of makes her way, and then Max, in pursuit, goes into pursuit mode, chasing her all the way up to like her like current living space, which is like in this hotel or whatever. She like tries to return it, but then learns that this particular dog is like set to like if that dog doesn't get adopted, that they will go to that place. I forget what exact that location where they would like kill dogs or whatever, because that's a thing that would happen, I guess, after a while. So she ends up adopting him, and returns with and bumps, and then they go to where her hotel, where Max picks up this a scent, goes into where it is, finds Trent there. So they're talking and stuff, and then Max or Bailey at this point does the same trick that he had done in the previous life as Molly, where he did the whole lay down thing to disclose the information that Trent at some point in time had gotten cancer. So CJ sees this, sort of is concerned, tells him to check in with the doctor. He does. They find out. He does a few calls to go into chemo, and thus CJ primarily takes care of him, as his like current girlfriend at the time was like kind of done. She like freaks out into like leaving or whatever. I think it's something like that. That I forget exactly what her deal ended up being, but anyways. So CJ ends up taking care of CJ for the while. After the chemo, it does like another little montage of that. So after he gets the good news of the therapy being a success and him beating the cancer, it transitions into him trying to want to help her in her musical career and then wanting to perform. She also bumps into her mother again, and then that, more reassurance of like, you won't know until you like actually go out and perform. And thus she does her little performance, and then afterwards Trent decides to take her to the farm, where the three of them bump into Ethan and I think her name is like Hannah, Ethan's wife. So after a few moments, Ethan sort of picks up that that's potentially Bailey. So he decides to take the dog outside, shows him that one trick that they used to do as Bailey, even refers to him, the dog, as Bailey in the room, and then every time the dog would bark. So the Bailey does the tricks that he used to do as Bailey, reaffirming that it's the same dog, or the same reincarnated dog. Afterwards, now she's, after that, all that stuff, she's convinced, so she tries to convince Trent that all the dogs that she has bumped into along the way have all been all the same dog. And he kind of buys into it as well, so they finally talk about it, and they finally hook up and kiss. It then goes into another montage afterwards of them growing up together, Ethan passing away, him continuing to look after CJ, Trent, and their new child that they have along the way. And then it shows the passing of that current dog. And then there's no other going back, I guess, to imply that this particular dog that had the ability to keep coming back, since it no longer had the need to do so, with the purpose and journey being done, to spend in this sort of heaven-like place with Ethan. And that was a dog's journey. And it's a really bittersweet story, a little happy story about, like, oh, dogs are really cute and helpful, and they're always there for you. And just a journey through several dogs, literally plural dogs' life, in order to protect CJ, and look out for her, and just be there to comfort her, do all the other stuff that she goes through throughout the movie. So, pretty solid. I definitely enjoyed it. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. If you're a dog owner, you probably would really appreciate a movie like this. No conflict of, like, dog injury to my knowledge again, so there's that as well, on top of, just being a nice little, loving little dog movie, with some supernatural element to it as well. And with that being said, that is my review of A Dog's Journey. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server, the other to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.